Back at it again here on the Orange and Black Insider, and boy, do we have some topics to discuss, whether it's some comments made by Bengals leadership at the owners' meetings down in Palm Beach, Florida, a couple of draft prospects the Bengals may be looking at, all kinds of different things. Even though they haven't been making the transactions, the signings, a lot of news surrounding the Cincinnati Bengals right now, and we are here to talk about it. I'm Anthony. He is John. John, Mr. Punctual, I am not. How are you, bud? Thanks for calling audibles today and moving the time around a little bit and being flexible, buddy.
Always so humble. I mean, Anthony actually has a real job that he does outside of this, and he takes care of a family with that, and he does so much work just to get a show out there for all of you guys. And I sit at home and I do my little fun fake job covering this team. So that's just kind of how the dynamic goes. Like, everyone who's listening to this and always hears Anthony apologize ahead of time about how the show started late, Anthony does everything in his power to make sure that a program gets out and it's of the highest quality. So I salute to you, Mr. Cosenza, for always actually making the time and adjusting to all the crap that gets thrown at your way. Well,
thank you. You just solidified, though, that you are the professional. It's amateur hour with me as we cover.
Straight compliments all we want.
I know. But appreciate you being flexible. Appreciate the listeners being flexible. This is the Orange and Black Insider Bengals podcast, part of the Believe Podcast Network, BLEAV. Got to resubscribe to the new feed on the Believe in Cincy podcast channel to get this show. If you like the audio side of things, this show, Talking Football with Bengal, Jim and Friends, 3 and Out with Jason and Kevin. You can get their videos on our YouTube channel too. But and then, of course, Matt and Willie No Ball with the coach, Matt Minnick and Willie Lutz. All of that stuff is on the Believe in Cincy podcast channel. You got to subscribe to that channel through your favorite audio streamer, iTunes, Stitcher, Spotify, all that good stuff. Please do that. Leave us a review, hopefully a positive one. That would be great. And if you like the video side of things, you can catch our videos on a number of different platforms, whether it is on YouTube. Like I said, our shows and 3 and Out shows are on our YouTube channel. We did put out a little tribute to Sam Hubbard as well on the channel, so go check that out. Just went live yesterday, I believe. For the members, it went live earlier this week, so that's why you got to be a member to the Orange and Black Insider YouTube channel. But then we also stream to Cincy Jungle's Facebook page as well as to a number of Twitter accounts. So tune in how you can, whether it's live or after the fact. We appreciate all the support you have shown us for so many years, over so many shows, and hopefully you continue to stick with us. And then, of course, we've got our lovely fans here. We appreciate all the compliments. And of course, yes, thank you, Robert, for the reminder. Keep it to cincyjungle.com and all of the great work John is doing at A2ZSports.com for all your Bengals news, opinions, analysis, and hopefully you tune in there. Okay, John, let's take a deep breath. Yeah, I know. Yeah, you take a deeper one maybe than I did there. Let's start. Do we want to start with Katie or Zach? Because both made some comments that elicited certain emotional responses that maybe weren't the most positive. So let's do a coin flip. You call it, buddy. Which one do you want to start with to start the show with?
I feel like we only have to flip this coin because only one of these people talks like once a year. So we better get to Miss Blackburn here.
Yeah. Well, Miss Blackburn made some comments about a couple of different topics. Mrs. Blackburn, I should say.
Yeah, Mrs. Blackburn.
Made a couple of comments that really didn't sit so well with the masses. I think one pertaining not to a player, but to another circumstance may have been misinterpreted. We'll talk about that in a second, but let's start. I almost just kept the banner Trey Hendrickson latest. I've been doing that for like the last, month. It's been on there. I almost kept it again, but we thought we'd change it up here. Look, the contract negotiation, and there's a subsequent kind of segment to this as well, which is Trey Hendrickson's response to the comments, but Katie Blackburn at the owners' meetings in Palm Beach, Florida, basically intimated that, I should pull up the actual quote, but I mean, to the effect of, we've been trying to work with Trey and, at some point you got to be happy at a dollar amount and what a contract looks like. And, we're working through the process and it just didn't sound very promising about progress being made, John. If you have the exact quote, please feel free to pull it up. But I mean, more or less, it was, we feel like we've made fair offers and at some point he's got to take it or leave it, was more or less the gist, it seemed, from the comment.
Yeah, this kind of happens a lot more often than I think the Bengals, specifically Katie Blackburn, would like it to happen, because she really only speaks once a year down at the annual league meetings. And it's about an hour, 45 minutes with local media, and a plethora of questions get asked. And obviously, with Jamar Chase and T. Higgins' contracts wrapped up, Trey Hendrickson's contract is the topic of discussion at the moment in regards to the actual team and the roster. And from what I gathered, like, there was a lot of questions about it, and the majority of the answers was a lot of, I don't really know, right? Like, nothing's really happening at the moment. She doesn't want to make any predictions. Obviously, she's not going to say anything that's like, oh yeah, like, we're going to get a deal done, or yeah, I don't see a deal happening. So it was a lot of that. And then, of course, the comments about he should be happy at certain rates and it's up to him to be happy, which is paraphrasing, but that's essentially what she said. That was also part of the answers. And that's what got ran with by Kelsey Conway of the Cincinnati.com. And obviously people picked it up. We picked it up. It got talked about on the national level, and it led to Trey Hendrickson hopping on Pat McAfee the next day, which we could talk about in a minute. But that was the comment that obviously everyone ran with. And per usual, like, I'll just be very candid here. The owners' meetings are a great reminder that people of a certain wealth status and power status talk a certain way and they communicate a certain way. And for us normal folks down here on the ground, it doesn't always come off as the most friendly. But this is kind of classic Bengals, where they kind of speak in a position of power and they realize that they have the leverage, all the leverage here in this situation. And that was her kind of just speaking very bluntly. And to be quite frank, like, a lot of people have told me when I've talked about the subject that, yeah, like, Trey doesn't really have a lot of power in this situation, and it is up to him to kind of accept whatever offer is at the table for him. And it doesn't sound like, Anthony, that there's going to be a lot of wiggle room here from the Bengals' perspective. And I think that's kind of the stance that they're taking here. They've kind of waited Trey out for the past couple of years after giving him the 1-year extension, and this kind of indicated that that's going to be the strategy here, where it's still a willingness, obviously, to get him under contract for the next couple of years and give him the pay raise. But the disconnect, obviously, is that the pay raise is not enough. And in her words, it's up to him to kind of deal with that.
Yeah, I pulled up a quote here. Let's pull it back up here. And this is courtesy, it's through the New York Post, but obviously this was presented by the Cincinnati media. But again, the quote is, it's on him to be happy at some point. Let me pull it back up here. It's on him to be happy at some point. I think some of it is on him to be happy at some point, and if he's not, that's what holds it up sometimes. So, it takes him to say yes to something. And look, we can say, and there is truth to it. We can say all we want that the Bengals have made a lot of big changes as an organization. We can say all we want that the Bengals have made a lot of great strides, but sometimes also, as the cliche and as lame as it is with this team and covering it, Tigers don't change their stripes all that often. This is the hard-nosed contract stance we have seen for decades when it comes to the Cincinnati Bengals and how they value players, the age of players obviously comes into account. And I mean, this is, an openly kind of hard-nosed stance. I mean, it more or less to me says we are where we are. We've offered what we've offered. He at some point has to realize what we have, where he is in his career, I guess, and take it or leave it. I mean, really, that's kind of what now we've seen them budge on the wide receivers. Obviously, we've seen other things happen. So there may be still some more wiggle room and some things to work out here. But, it's a very hard line stance, even though it seems like a benign quote on the surface a little bit. She wasn't scathing or, ripping him or anything like that. It just was, this is what it is. And he has to kind of be happy with what we can offer him.
I mean, she just plainly spoke what a negotiation is. And
Yep.
I think when you see how the sausage gets made, it makes you very uncomfortable. And if we were to be privy to all the details of every contract negotiation that the Bengals have ever successfully completed, we would probably not like the things that are said between those four walls. Just so happens that every now and then we get a little taste of what it actually looks like, and it doesn't look good, right? And that's why I think for the most part, the Bengals don't like this stuff getting out into the media. They don't like when they have to talk about it to the press. They don't like when players bring it up to the press. And in the past, when things are kind of kept on the down low, things typically end up working out, right? Like they had the whole policy with Joe Burrow that, hey, like, let's keep this out of the media. Let's make sure that these conversations stay internally. And that was an agreement from both sides. And obviously it took a while, but it ended up getting done. For the most part, that was the case with Jamar Chase and T. Higgins. They didn't really talk about the contract situations very much outside of the very rare chances where they were asked about it with the media, but they didn't hop on, shows to make a case about it because they knew that they had at least a little bit of leverage here with where they were in their careers and what type of money they were going to make. I think they kind of see Trey in kind of a different category because, like you said, he's a bit older. And I think we can all agree, or most of us can agree, that shouldn't be something that deviates him and puts him in a different tier, but that's clearly what they see it as.
The older two generations of the Brown family, like you said, they are a bit microphone and camera shy. But when they get in front of it, they speak plainly, they speak their mind, and they show kind of who they are from the business side of perspectives. They're very dodgy and they're very, this is what it is. This is what we've done. And, they have seen a number of players, I don't want to say cave, but they've seen a lot of players kind of meet their demands or meet what their contract numbers are. And this is kind of more of the same. And I think this is a big reason why, like you said, maybe they don't want the media to misconstrue exactly what they mean. And that has happened, even by us and others. But this is why you see Zac Taylor in front of the microphone the most. This is why you see Duke Tobin in front of the microphone the most. This is why you saw Marvin Lewis in front of the microphone the most, because they know how to absorb and deflect a lot of these questions, quite frankly, better than the older generations of the Brown family do. And so now the response from Trey Hendrickson, he went on the Pat McAfee show and he kind of sounded more or less blindsided by these comments and was kind of taken aback, it would seem, and kind of said, hey, I've played on these deals. I did a mini extension. All these things. I've kind of played ball and I just want something that's fair. So in his eyes, whatever has been offered is not fair market value. I think he even said, I don't want to be paid, top market money. I want something fair and I want insurance. I want, long-term financial security. And obviously that sounds more reasonable than how Katie Blackburn worded it. So now there's this open sparring kind of once again after really a year to 2 years of it with their wide receivers and Trey Hendrickson. It's continuing on now. And we've talked about it, John, that this cannot linger into the late spring and summer months. It just can't.
Yeah, I thought in regards to that point, there was something interesting that Trey said when talking about how OTAs are coming up, the fact that Sam Hubbard is now retired, there's a big vacancy in terms of leadership for the defensive line, really just the defense in general. And he kind of alluded to, I would love to fill that vacancy, but I think we can all agree that if he isn't paid by the time OTAs begin in late May and mandatory minicamp in early June, he's probably not going to be there because he's got to hold out for the sake of making himself more valuable and trying to utilize whatever leverage that he has. So that was one thing that he said. The most critical thing that he said, though, was the state of the communications between him and the
Yeah.
Bengals. And he said on two different occasions, quote, that was a little disappointing to hear what Katie had said, because again, this is, like you said, this is the second time that he's been blindsided by comments from the front office. The first time was after the Senior Bowl when Duke Tobin was speaking about him, and he went on McAfee like a week after that, and he spoke about how he heard that from Twitter, and this was the same type of situation. But regarding to Katie's comments, he said, quote, that was a little disappointing because communication has been poor over the last couple of months. That's something that I hold in high regard. They have not communicated with my agent directly. It's been something that's been a little bit frustrating, but again, this is the business of it. And he went on to clarify that when he said communication has been poor, it's kind of been like spotty here and there. We know of at least two times where he or his agent has spoken directly to the higher ups of the team. There was one time in February where his agent, I think, met with the team before the combine, and then he went himself to Troy Blackburn and Katie Blackburn to request to seek a trade, and he got that granted. Other than that, though, it seems like there hasn't been any real communication like there was between Katie Blackburn and Duke Tobin and Rocky Arsenault when they were doing the Higgins and Chase contracts. Yep. And I was really confused by this, because who else would be communicating with him if not Katie and Duke, the two main powers here that actually negotiate these contracts? It was Ari Mirov of the 33rd team that reported this morning, and he's been really lockstep with this because he has a relationship with Hendrickson's agent, and he said that the communication that Trey's side has had is not with Katie and Duke. It's been with other ancillary members of the front office, and that to me signals that apparently this just isn't important enough in terms of a negotiation for Katie and Duke to be involved, because they think that this should be an open and shut type of a deal where the player here doesn't have a lot of wiggle room to negotiate. And again, this is a lot of educated and informed type of speculation here. But if that's the case, and it's not Katie and Troy who again handle the biggest contracts that this team has, like they are essentially the de facto GMs in regards to the financial aspects of this, if that's what's really going on here, then I totally understand Trey's frustration here, because he should be getting the communication and the treatment that Jamar and T have gotten. And I understand why he goes to the public forum to actually say these things, because again, he doesn't have a lot of leverage here. He's doing everything in his power to get everyone on his side to make the Bengals look like the villains. But as we both know, they don't give one crap about looking like the villains, and they never will.
Like you said, oddly reminiscent of the early portions, or at least last year, with T. Higgins in the negotiations, and with his previous agent, there was some talks that communication has just not been there, and it's disheartening to hear it kind of happening again. And like you said, it does make you wonder, where is this on the priority list? Where is this extension on the Bengals priority list? We had a comment here, and we're going to talk more in depth about this with Zac Taylor's comments next, but are they waiting to see how the draft goes? I don't know if that pertains to Trey Hendrickson. I mean, they might, but that is risky and borderline dumb. In this instance, now there's some other positions we're going to talk about where it may make a little more sense, but still, you have a star player on your roster who wants a little longer term security. He has earned it. And there seems to be a pretty hardline stance there between the Bengals and Trey Hendrickson. We'll see what comes of this. The other element to that comment by Michael here is, are they waiting for the draft? We talked about this too. They may be waiting closer to the draft to see if someone gets a fire lit under them. They don't get the edge rusher they want, and maybe they're more willing to deal something higher than what has been offered for Trey Hendrickson. Maybe that's what happens. I don't know. I hope not. Trey Hendrickson wants to be in Cincinnati. He has made that clear, and he has earned a contract. And, he, like you said, he's not looking for absolute top dollar. He's looking for something fair and something longer term. So that's where things are, more of an impasse yet again with Trey Hendrickson and the Bengals. One more quick comment before we transition to what Zac and some of the things he said, John, is the stadium issue. And the Bengals lease runs through this year, I believe. And they have an option for next year, I think is kind of the deal, but they can bounce, I guess, if they want. And there was something that was asked of her, and Katie said something to the effect of, I think her comment was more, well, in theory, we could go somewhere else next year. That's and then it got misconstrued to, the Bengals are now, holding the city of Cincinnati hostage. I don't think that's what was meant. In my opinion, this is where the opinion comes in. I don't think that's what was meant by that comment. I think it's more like, well, in theory, we could do that, but I find it hard to believe that the Bengals would leave the area in the state of Ohio if that's even what's crossing their mind at this point. Obviously, they're looking for either massive stadium upgrades or, maybe a new one as a whole. Paul Brown Stadium opened in 2000, I think, 99, something like that. So, I mean, it's up there in terms of age, but regardless, I don't think it's, hey, we're moving next year, that some people kind of took it and ran with it a little bit. I think it's more, well, in theory, we could do that. But obviously more work needs to be done between the city and the Bengals themselves too, to again, hardline stance, just black and white. This is what it is, right?
Again, it's like when you speak so matter-of-factly and bluntly in this day and age, people are going to lose their minds because, of course, if my apartment lease expires at the end of June, right, I could go anywhere after that, right? It doesn't make sense necessarily for me to move to Alaska, but I could, in theory, do that. That's the same thing with the Bengals and their lease. Officially, they have 5 2-year rolling extensions, and that they can exercise the first one at the end of June. And I would expect that to be the case if nothing gets transpired between now and then. And those are baked in to give them that flexibility to make sure that they have time to actually work something out. But yeah, again, it was a lot of like, I don't know, like things aren't really progressing at the speed that I wanted to. And then the county fired back today saying that we're ready to do this whenever. So it, like, the county and Trey Hendrickson are kind of feeling the same way right now with Katie Blackburn and how they're talking about it. So it's a lot of posturing, and it's a lot of just plain speak for the sake of negotiating and to not give up a lot of leverage. I don't think the Bengals want a new stadium. I think they want, to make sure that it remains top of the line and can be usable for the next 20 to 30 years and everything like that. But I see articles about like, 5 cities where the Bengals could move. And it's like, I don't think a lot of people realize that there's a law that pretty much prevents a sports team in Ohio that's publicly funded their stadium from moving out of the state. It's called the Mandel Law. And it requires the team to put up the team up for sale like 6 months ahead of time, and to give like the whole state like a heads up. So it really makes the process a lot harder to do. It's how the Columbus Crew ended up not going to Texas and staying in Columbus, and it's all because obviously Armadale is an evil SOB and he moved the Browns to Baltimore. So that whole thing is because of what happened 30 years ago. So the idea of the Bengals moving out of Ohio is just completely unrealistic. But the idea of them moving out of Hamilton County to another location, maybe in more suburbia in Southwest Ohio, maybe even like, or just somewhere in that general vicinity, that is possible. But then Katie also said that she likes where the stadium is and she wants to keep it downtown, and that is the goal. Obviously, that doesn't go to the national media and everything like that because it's not as spicy or anything. But again, that was just something of like, yeah, like the lease expires, we could go anywhere, but you have to think about this rationally. The Bengals don't want to leave downtown Cincinnati. The county doesn't want them to leave downtown Cincinnati. This is all just, again, uncomfortable negotiations that go to the public.
The Bengals do know, and their leadership knows, that they are in the driver's seat, be it in the Hendrickson situation or maybe even this one, especially now that they've got in their back pocket mega extensions to multiple stars, and they know that people will come watch. They've got a competitive product, although they haven't been to the playoffs the last couple of years. They've been a winning team, a couple of years away from AFC Championship, Super Bowl, etc. So, I mean, I think part of that comes with, number one, I think it's just how they speak and how they speak in public. Number two, I think they know that they are in the driver's seat. Number three, just the schmuck in me wonders if they just put these quotes out and then they go back in their offices and go, watch what happens. Let's just see what happens. How they run with it. Kind of the Heath Ledger Joker line, like everybody loses their minds, right? It kind of feels like that a little bit, but I mean, again, I think they know that they are in a bit of the driver's seat for these situations, and that's probably how and why these comments were made for both situations by Katie Blackburn. I by no means don't want to put words in her mouth, but again, we're trying to interpret the tea leaves here and what was said. Let's move on to what Zac said. And really, namely, it was about the Bengals kind of crawling in their free agency shell at this point. And it's a little bit predictable with the big contracts that they just doled out, but disheartening because there are still roster holes. There are still roster questions, depth questions, starter questions on this team. And basically, Zac Taylor intimated that, we're going to more or less see how the draft goes and then reassess, sift through the ashes there and reassess what we're going to do, namely in the guard market, which is where it's been Lucas Patrick, and that's it. So that's what their approach, as he put it, seems to be at this point for the next couple of weeks.
Yeah, it seems like the top options that they could sign at that point, or at this point, are all probably better off waiting until after the draft just to see where the best opportunities for them to go. And you see that happen around the league. You don't really see it that often in terms of the Bengals participating in that. The most obvious example I can think of is Trevor Siemian from a couple years ago. They met with Siemian, I think, in free agency around this time, actually, in 2023. They were interested in drafting a backup quarterback in that year's draft. They didn't, so they ended up signing Siemian right after the draft. He competed for a spot. He lost to Jake Browning. The rest is history, right? Other than that, I think Trent Taylor was like a tryout player in May of 2021. And he signed a one-year deal. Yeah. So, but you don't really see a lot of free agents sign with the Bengals with like an actual chance of making the team. And that would be the case, obviously, if you're signing a Brandon Scherff or Will Hernandez sometime in early May or late April after the draft, where they see Cincinnati as a place where they can have a guaranteed starting job because whatever happened in the draft didn't work out in the Bengals' favor. But what I got from it, Anthony, was that they will be targeting an offensive lineman who can play guard within the first handful of rounds with the intent of having him compete to start. And that is their intent. That is their plan. And in all likelihood, they will draft one. In the case that they may not feel comfortable with the guy that they draft in terms of him starting immediately, maybe the aggression goes up another level to contact one of the guards that they may be interested to still out on the market as like a fail-safe and said, hey, we don't really have the rookie that we envisioned or whatever the case may be want to come in here and start. And then that all ends up happening. If they do draft a guard, though, in the first 2 rounds, you have to assume that guard is going to have a really good chance of starting, and maybe their willingness to go out and sign a guard probably drops at that point. But I really do think that he was wise to say that, we have to wait until the draft to see how it goes, because until then, we don't really know anything.
We're going to bring this up right now because our number one, it's Mr. Generosity, always supporting the program with the YouTube super chat. Thank you again. But number 2, we are not doing offensive linemen for our 2 prospect profiles we have. And John did a great job last week breaking down Ariante Ursary, who could be kind of one of those options that's a tackle guard, which we know the Bengals love the swing players there. Are we really going for 2 starting guards from the draft? I think, if you're asking me right now, I think it's 1. And then I think it's a veteran after the draft. That's what I think, because if the Bengals stay put with only 6 picks, using 2 on guards and relying on those to potentially man 1, maybe 2 starting jobs right away is probably a bit risky, especially for a franchise that leans on the conservative side in terms of risk reward. So that's what I see in John, going the veteran route post draft. Being the old man here, I'll dole out a little bit of a life lesson, I guess. Whether it's football, whether it's business, a lot of things in life is about, and negotiations especially, is about leverage, right? Who has leverage? And it would be interesting to see to gauge what the leverage would be when the Bengals, if and when they go after a veteran guard after the draft. Would the veteran have the leverage because, hey, they only grabbed one guard, and is he ready to start now? I don't know. And they have questions with Volson, that sort of thing. Or is it, hey, you've waited this long, Katie Blackburn, take this deal, be happy with it, that sort of thing. But that my take is, if they sit with 6 picks, it's going to be 1 guard, maybe another guy somewhere else in the draft that has multi-positional versatility, but 1 guy that they think could start potentially day 1, and then probably another veteran. That's my guess at this point.
Yeah, I think something like 2015 where they drafted Abuehi and then Jake Fisher. Like, I don't think that was necessarily planned, but it is possible, right? If they deem that like 2 early picks, the best picks that they can make are offensive linemen, like that would be the one scenario in which you would see like your 2 starting guards come from the draft. But again, like you said, I don't think that's likely. I think at the moment, the most likely outcome is that they draft a rookie and then he competes with Lucas Patrick, and maybe there's a battle between Cody Ford and Cordell Volson. The more that you talk about this, the less ideal that it sounds in practicality. And just the idea of having 2 battles for for both guard spots happening in training camp doesn't sound too appetizing.
Not great, Bob. Not great, Bob.
Great.
Yeah. But anything else you want to touch on with Zac Taylor's comments aside from Bengals kind of cooling it on free agency?
Yeah, I think he was. I mean, obviously the question that has been asked a ton this offseason, but is almost being drowned out by all the other drama is how are you guys going to avoid an 0-2 start again for like the 5th consecutive year? And we've talked about how all these crazy ideas in OTAs and training camp and everything like that to increase aggressiveness. Maybe the best solution is to just take the preseason seriously, and that appears to be what they plan to do. Zac Taylor said, "I would expect our players to play more often in the preseason," and it seemed like that in years past was also going to be the case, and it didn't end up being the case because Joe Burrow was hurt, and they didn't want the rest of the offense to play without the starting quarterback for the sake of chemistry and everything like that. But there are really no excuses at this point to have your starters kind of sit out for 3 weeks in August when most of the NFL is using that time to just get into the flow of things. And if you're going to have bad weeks, you want them to happen in August rather than September. Like they're just out of excuses at this point to do the same thing in August over and over again and expect September to be any different. So I think regardless of what happens in terms of injuries and any roadblocks or any forks in the road that they come up against, I think you will see starters play a lot more often in August.
Definition of insanity, right? We all know what that is. The one pause I have about it is, okay, now you've got all these guys to big deals and all this kind of stuff. And let's make sure we avoid the injury bug. But overall, I think it's a good thing. We've been kind of talking about this for 3-4 years now. Ramiro, real quick, who's the offensive line coach? Scott Peters, Callahan disciple. So that is who the Bengals offensive line coach is. And we are going to move on to some draft profiles. And before we do, just want to remind folks to subscribe to our YouTube channel. If you're watching on your mobile phone or your computer, you should be able to subscribe to our YouTube channel via the show icon underneath the bottom right-hand side of your screen. Click that, do the subscribe thing, click the bell, thumbs up, all the things. We appreciate that. You can also like the Cincy Jungle Facebook page, not only to get links to Cincy Jungle articles, but have all of the live streams come here as well as videos after the fact. You can catch that. And of course, we stream live video-wise through a number of different Twitter accounts, including our at Bengals OBI and at Cincy Jungle. We stream there live. And then, of course, once again, if you like the audio side of things after the fact, go to the Believe in Cincy, BLEAV in Cincy podcast channel. Subscribe through your favorite audio streamer. Leave us a review if you can. You can get our show, a handful of others as well. So we're bringing you all kinds of different content, particularly now in draft season. So you got to catch that. Unfortunately, I don't think the 2 draft profiles that we are providing today are going to be right up Alan's wheelhouse here, saying this draft is DL and RB heavy and the Bengals need 2 guards. So, Alan, buckle up, buddy. We're not going to be talking about guards, and I don't know. I've been asked and blessed with the opportunity to be the person who is making the Bengals pick for the SB Nation National Mock Draft. I think we're going to try and do 2 rounds, actually. And as it stands, I don't think it's been published quite yet. I have made the pick, but one of on the short list, there are a handful of names. Now, just to remind folks, the way the board kind of fell, Walter Nolan went really early. Mike Green went, and a couple of other, Mason Graham, and a couple of other guys that we've talked about. Not too many, of course, predictably Gene T and Abdul Carter and that sort of thing. So, some usual suspects. Mike Green went a little earlier than I think people expected. Nolan went, I think, he was like number 10 or 11 overall. So he went a lot earlier than I had expected. So that, there's a short list of players then at 17. Obviously, I listened to some trade stuff, Didn't really want to do that because the only offer I really received that was a decent one would have had me trade out of the first round over, as a whole for the Bengals, and I didn't really want to do that. So one of the guys that I thought about and researched in making this pick was a defensive lineman, another defensive lineman, and that is Oregon. And I know, West Coast, I know, but if you've if you've paid attention, this is one of the guys that has been talked about with the Cincinnati Bengals and their potential interest. A guy who is tall, big, and plays kind of all over the line a little bit, depending on the front and formation. I really like this guy. I waver between if I like him more than Walter Nolan or not. I like the profile. I worry a little bit of, okay, is he, isn't he? You know, I mean, positionally, right? Is he this? Is he that? Can he be a true 3-tech? Can he be a Geno Atkins disruptor? But this last, and he's a little older, and we'll talk about that in just a second. But this last year he was a transfer to Oregon, and he had a really nice season with Oregon, and he should be around when the Bengals pick at 17, and is probably one of the guys they are eyeing at that spot. Obviously, you need to get some more. I know they got Chris Jenkins Jr. in the second round last year, and obviously McKinley Jackson, and they brought in TJ Slayton. So they've done some things over the past couple of seasons for the defensive line, but they need that interior pass rush. They need that true interior disruptor. I think that this guy can be that. And I'll show you some things here. This is one with this on the film, I'm going to go, kind of back and slower. The other guy, I'm going to try and play at full speed, and you'll see why in just a second. But Derrick Harmon, really, really intriguing player for the Cincinnati Bengals. I'm going to pull up this video for you here. On the profile, looks every bit the part, right? And big dude, built really well, moves really well, like I said. And sometimes you'll see on some of these clips, I think that he has played edge and 3-man front sometimes. And then, of course, he's on the interior, transfer from Michigan. He had 45 tackles, 5 sacks, 11 tackles for loss. This is all last year. 4 passes defended, which is the old Carlos Dunlap, big boy, getting the big arms up there. 2 forced fumbles, 2 fumble recoveries. So he's disruptive in a lot of different ways, which you like. Causing turnovers, causing sacks, a lot of other tackles for loss in general. Just a solid resume coming into this year's draft class. You can see gets pushed back a little bit, but sheds the block, makes a nice play, right? And then again, we're starting with run plays, by the way. You see here again, kind of gets lost in the wash a little bit, but gets in there, makes a nice tackle against Michigan. You see here, here he is off the edge, kind of goes unblocked, makes the quarterback sack in conjunction with another player there. And then this is, I believe this is a pretty big play here. You can see here, beats on the inside and creates an incompletion there. It's this one. This is a big play right here. Causes the forced fumble on Arizona State. I'll see if I can get the proper RAS here. So I thought I had the right one. Duh. And then there's one more coming in here again, kind of almost gets held by the helmet, still gets in there, makes the play on the quarterback there. Just disruptive, right? Disruptive, and a guy that, whether it's against the run or the pass, just makes a lot of different plays. And I think that he would provide a lot of value for the Bengals. May not be the top name on a lot of people's list, but at 17, position of need, etc. That is, I like him.
I like him too. I do think
you have the RAS. You have the RAS.
I do. Yeah.
Okay.
We
God,
can pull
John
it up
to the
here.
rescue. John to the rescue. Good God.
I mean, shout out to Darius Alexander, who's an athletic freak in his own right. Fortunately for Alexander, he did more testing compared to Derrick Harmon. I think Derrick Harmon ran a 4.95 40-yard dash at 6'4.5", 313 pounds. So he was very content with that time at that size. It's a great size speed combination, especially for a penetrating pass rushing 3 technique. He didn't test other than that, so he has an incomplete RAS if you guys really abide by that. But I think on tape though, like the explosion is definitely there. The first step get off is there, and I think the bend is there too in terms of getting under guards pads and kind of with the flexation with his lower half. And that's important, obviously, for not just edge rushers, but defensive tackles who are kind of starting in those wide alignments too. So if you have a guy like Harmon who can have that length as a 3 technique to keep himself separated from pass blockers and guards in general, and then you can create space and kind of flatten around the pocket to the quarterback, that's obviously very important. Everything about him and his process as a pass rusher is very promising. One of the best pass rushing win rates out of this entire class, which is why he's getting a lot of first round hype. I think as far as his character goes and the person that he is, there's been nothing but green flags there as well. He was a transfer player to Oregon, so he started off in Michigan State, and then obviously Oregon had just billions of dollars in NIL money to just attract a phenomenal roster that ended up being the #1 team in the country, and he was part of that, along with Jamari Caldwell, who was a phenomenal nose tackle who played next to that entire Oregon defensive line was great, right? And it worked for Harmon because he had a lot of pressure, he had a lot of disruption. My concern with him is that he didn't always translate that production or pressure into actual production behind the backfield or in the backfield. Only I think a handful of sacks to go with 55 pressures for the season. It's a bit of a discrepancy there. And as far as like just tackling in general, like there were a lot of missed tackles on tape as well. I think it has one of the highest missed tackle rates out of this entire interior defensive lineman class. So I think in overall, there's a lot of promise, which makes him someone that you would consider in the back half of the first round. A complete player, I think he's not quite yet because there's a lot of flags in his run defense in terms of actually finishing and wrapping up guys, and that's just kind of littered all over his tape. But I think, Anthony, when you're talking about inserting this guy within the Bengals defensive line, when you have sure tacklers like BJ Hill and TJ Sladen who are starting at defensive tackle for you, when you have a guy like Trey Hendrickson who can finish better than any other edge rusher in the entire league in terms of generating pressures into sacks, I think when you have someone like Harmon who can cause disruption up the middle and create opportunities for other guys to clean up that production, that's a good fit for him compared to a lot of other landing spots that he could have in the NFL. I think the whole conversation, the debate, though, is that do you want to select a guy like Harmon who may not be that complete player because he doesn't always finish up the production on his own? Do you want to select that guy in the first round instead of seeing if he does fall? Because he's probably not going to fall to that mid-second round pick, but I think that's the debate with him, is that do you take that risk to see if a player like that, if other teams are concerned about maybe the incompleteness of his profile as well?
Yeah, so this is what happens when you look at the wrong piece of info. I was right in terms of he's more like 6'5", 311, and close to 22. But yes, a transfer from Michigan State, went on to Oregon. There are flaws, but there's a lot of and we've seen these Oregon guys on the interior in the NFL thrive. Right, we've seen a number of these guys do that, and I do think that whether it is like a Haloti Ngata or, I think Eric Armstead was a former Oregon Duck, the fact that they played some edge on 3-man front, and then they also kicked inside and did some different things. I think that suits them well in terms of effectiveness at the pro level. But again, a big guy, different build, if you're looking for kind of that Geno Atkinsy guy. I mean, Geno was, right around 6 foot and 300. This guy's, like I said, more like 6'5" and 311. So apologize for the error on the one graphic there, but still, I think you get the gist of what this guy brings. He does make some plays against the run. And what struck me again on some of those plays is, there was a couple of times where you could say, is that a loss? I don't know in terms of the block, but still got in there and made the tackle for a minimal gain. The missed tackles and other things obviously are concerning, but that is, I think he would be a solid addition to what the Bengals are trying to do up front.
Yeah, I think he's going to be an effective player in the NFL. I have a lot of thoughts about how we look at potential when it comes to draft prospects, but I think there is enough positives to Derrick Harmon's profile where you could justify taking him in the back half of the first round. Obviously, the Bengals are at the beginning of the back half of the first round, so I'm interested to see what the board would have to look like for them to take him. I think that he would be in kind of a similar bucket as some other players that have some, minor question marks, but I think in terms of a quote unquote safe pick, he is proven as someone that knows what he's doing as a pass rusher. He can win one-on-one situations. And honestly, Anthony, outside of the guard spot, I think that's the biggest weakness on this roster. If this defense is in 3rd and 8, who are your 4 pass rushers rushing the quarterback? It's Trey Hendrickson. I guess it's BJ Hill. It's Joseph Osai or Miles Murphy. Who is the other defensive tackle? I don't think you trust anyone else on the roster right now in those situations. You can insert Harmon right there, even if he only plays like 15 snaps a game, because it is going to be a very deep defensive tackle room. You still need an X factor there that can win on his own, and you can kind of trust just kind of leaving him to his own devices and winning that matchup for other guys to end up finishing and cleaning up. So I think it makes a lot of sense for this year and obviously beyond, because they don't really have that proven disruptor at 3 technique. And I think that's going to be a position and a role that they fill very early in the draft.
Yep. Well, probably within the first couple of rounds. Let's hope there is not some other issues with the next video. This is what happens when you rely on me for the video production, man. It's a tradition unlike any other, right? There's either a typo or some damn thing. Regardless, look, this is probably not going to be a popular opinion. Well, the Bengals are going to be in search of some kind of an additional running back addition this year, whether that's late in the draft, like where they drafted Chase Brown, who was very effective this last year, or maybe a little earlier. And John, you know the Bengals' track record in terms of, Ickey Woods, 2nd round pick, right? Corey Dillon, 2nd round pick. Kenny Irons, 2nd round pick. Joe Mixon, 2nd round pick. They have often, when they feel that they can get that bigger back, whether it is as a supplemental guy or a guy that, you can just split carries with, maybe become the bell cow guy. And this is not knocking Chase Brown, but they need other players at that position as of right now, right? I think Khalil Herbert signed elsewhere, and, you're trying to figure out what Travion Williams brings to the table as a running back, aside from kick returning and that sort of thing. So this is a guy right now, and I mentioned the last name I mentioned, I started looking at him and people are comparing him to Joe Mixon. People, the running style, etc. People see the explosion, the size, and his ability to move at his size. A recent mock draft from Yahoo Sports had the Bengals taking this player. I believe it was in the 2nd round, though. I could be mistaken, but this was a guy that they had taking him. And he's not talked about as much because of Ashton Jeanty, but University of North Carolina running back Omarion Hampton. He wears number 28. He's just under, hopefully I have the right RAS profile for God's sake. He's just under 6 feet. And, right around, Joe Mixon was 6'1", right at that 220 mark. Now, what I notice, and it's actually a little bit more of a positive than Mixon. Mixon had that real upright running style, right? You see this guy, Hampton, run forward with a little more lean. And so, that upright style sometimes can get you in a little bit of trouble. But there are a lot of similarities here. And so if the Bengals take care of something in the first round, whether that is Derrick Harmon, take edge rusher, that sort of thing. Maybe if this guy is hanging around in the 2nd round, where the Bengals like to draft really good running backs and have had a good track record for the most part in doing so, Giovanni Bernard, another one, right? Maybe this is a guy they look at to help spell and work with just a different back. Okay, 5'11", 221. He's 22. He's a junior. He is from Forest City, North Carolina. And look at some of the stats, John, right here. 1660 rushing yards last year, 15 rushing touchdowns, yards per carry, 5.9, 38 receptions for 300. This is all just last year. 373 and 2 touchdowns. Hey, I got the right one. There it is right there. And you can see here the size, it's pretty good. Weight is really good, and you see the 40-yard dash. That's pretty solid for that size, right? And the vertical and the broad, the explosion rate. The shuttle, not so great, but bigger guy, you maybe expect that a little bit, right? And here's goal line stuff, right? And this is just physical, break tackles. That we start with the goal line stuff, and then we get to the sizzle later, right? Goal line, boom. Short yardage, cut, boom, and in. Here we go with the big plays, though. Couple of cuts, break a tackle, and see ya. Excuse me. Gets tackled out of bounds there. Here's another one. These are full speed. Bye. See ya. But do you see the running style, right? It's kind of mixing Le'Veon Bellish, right? There's some patience, there's a cut, and there's go. You know, the big pump of the arms, right, to get the momentum going. You see the kicking out of tackles there, and gets almost to the end zone on that one. And then here's just a couple. They really use the shovel pass a couple of times really effectively with him. So here he is just weaving through traffic. Another big one there. So a lot of nice stuff on film for him. Couple of things. Will he be? I'm not advocating for him at 17. Will he be there sometime in the second round? Will the Bengals be tempted? He's not. He hasn't done all of the, his passing routes, his receiving routes weren't overly complicated or anything like that, but swings, shovels, all that kind of stuff, very effective. Brings a little bit more of a load than Chase Brown, right? And he has okay to good long speed, but you saw him get chased down a couple of times, not great long speed, but that's what comes with 220 pounds. Still sub 4.5 speed. I really like this guy. I really, really like this guy. I don't know if a running back is in play for the Bengals this early. And a lot of people might not like it if they went that route, especially not shoring up the offensive line or defensive line earlier or that sort of thing. But I think if you're banking on this offense scoring 40 to 50 a game, this guy helps you achieve that in a big, big way. And you can see he breaks tackles well, cut, and you see what he does in the red zone, right? Just a beast. Push, and break tackles. So I really, really like this guy. I would probably be in the minority that I would be pretty ecstatic if the Bengals ended up picking this guy in the second round.
If he is there in the second round, he's probably the pick, because I think he would be far and away the best player available. And I say that because I think the majority of mock drafts that I see have him going not just in the first round, before the Bengals pick in the first round. Like the Cowboys, I think, are a common place where he finds himself at like 12th overall, just because Ashton Genty ends up going in the top 10 either to like the Raiders or the Bears. If the Bengals do pick a running back in the first round, it's probably going to have to be Hampton, because I don't foresee Ashton Genty lasting that long. And that's a whole obviously another conversation regarding like if you draft a running back in the first round. But I think back to 2 years ago, when the Bengals still had Joe Mixon on the team, and we knew they were going to be interested in drafting a running back, and there was a lot of hype about Jahmyr Gibbs being like linked to the team. And of course, they picked, I think, 28th that year, and they ended up picking him out.
He went earlier than a lot of people thought too. Yeah,
100%. Like the Detroit Lions surprised a lot of people by drafting both him and Jack Campbell really early, and obviously that ended up being a phenomenal draft class for them. But ever since then, the running game has kind of had a renaissance, a resurgence around the NFL, particularly with teams with already, really good offensive lines where you can just insert a running back and then the production kind of speaks for itself and kind of follows through. The Bengals, unfortunately, still for like the 10th year in a row, don't really have a complete offensive line where you could probably see those results. But I think because of how much value that I think teams realize that running backs still have when they're put in the right situations, that's what's probably going to get Omarion Hampton drafted relatively early. And if he does somehow fall to the middle of the second round, then I think the Bengals, who are definitely, like you said, they're going to be looking for a running back at some point in this draft. They've met with Biashil Tudden at his pro day, Jesus Christ, who was one of the fastest running backs at the NFL scouting combine. A little bit of fumbling issue. They also met with Genty and Cam Scatterbo at the combine. So they're going to be interested in drafting a running back as someone to be a long-term pairing. I think to Chase Brown. I don't think Zach Moss is long for the roster. I think they're still waiting to see what his medical is, and they're going to eventually release him once he's medically cleared. So there's no contract stipulations that come with that, but they're going to be drafting a running back at some point. And I think if clear value exists to them on day 2, despite their other needs, if Hampton is there in the second round, I think they would be all over that for sure.
Yeah. So good news, bad news when it comes to Hampton. Led the conference in rushing yards the last 2 years, 1504 in 23, and as I mentioned, 1660 this last year. Led them in touchdowns with 15 in 2023, matched that number in 2024. But the problem is that the amount of attempts and the amount of plays, he also led the conference. So might that scare off a little teams asking about, tread on the tires, so on and so forth. I don't know. I mean, sometimes that gets to teams in terms of, how much wear are we getting right away?
Right. And I think there's also, it's such a strong running back class too, that maybe some teams would feel like they can get some type of a quality option, if they were to wait until like the 3rd or 4th round or something like that. And maybe that ends up pushing them down, but it's considered a strong running back class because it's really strong at the top. Genty is probably considered to be on par with Bijan Robinson, or maybe even greater if he's going to end up being drafted a little bit earlier. There's obviously the 2 Ohio State guys, and Trey Henderson and Quinshon Judkins are probably going to be somewhere in that day 2 range as well. And then you just have a plethora of guys in day 3, which is probably where the Bengals are going to end up drafting a running back anyways. You look at the Zac Taylor era, the earliest that they drafted a running back is in the 5th round, but mostly it's been in the 6th round and just in that day 3 range. So I think that's still probably where the Bengals end up finding themselves, taking advantage of the depth in this class. But I think we see it every year. There's always some type of a surprise pick, whether the Bengals didn't expect some guy to be there, and it's just a guy that kind of comes out of nowhere and says, oh yeah, I mean, I guess he's still available. I guess the Bengals have to take this guy. Like that really happened with Jordan Battle. Like they almost took him in the 2nd round of 2023. He was the highest graded player on their board, but they still took a guy in DJ Turner because he filled a better need. And then a round passed, and then Jordan Battle was still there. And even if they didn't need a safety at the time, they even traded down to see if he was still there, and then they took him. And now obviously they're going to start Jordan Battle, so it ended up being a great pick in the long run. But those picks do happen pretty much every single year, and it could happen at running back.
Well, that is Omarion Hampton, a guy that the Bengals could be interested in going forward. I have to, do I have to put this up? I mean, it is a YouTube super chat, but I mean, yeah. I mean, that's what happens when you do this at 10.
He's earned a jab. I think Mr. Whisper has earned a jab, I think.
He has earned a jab. I don't have much on the way out, John. Let's drop the mic and get out of here. I'm very curious to see how this whole stadium thing works out because, with all of the contract talks and everything going on with players, it's going to be very interesting to see what the Bengals end up doing, what the county ends up doing, what the city ends up doing for the foreseeable future.
Yeah, I think I literally just was looking at an article before we went live. It was from For the Win. It was the top 5 cities that if the Bengals were to relocate, it's their top 5 ranking. And number 5 in this order is Orlando, Florida. Number 4 is Salt Lake City. Number 3 is Oklahoma City. Number 2 is San Diego. Number 1, San Antonio. I think I'm just going off of a limb here. If it was up to Anthony, they would definitely move to San Diego for the sake of proximity. Makes sense. A lot shorter of a drive compared to going all the way to Cincinnati. But how would you rank these personally? If San Diego is the number 1, where would you want the Bengals to move? Because I'm assuming, Anthony, if they were in this crazy, outlandish alternative universe, if they moved out of Cincinnati, you probably wouldn't care as much as someone who lives in Cincinnati. Is that right?
I actually kind of would.
Really?
Yeah, I mean, San Diego would be nice, but I like being on a little Bengals island out here, right? Where not everybody's wearing the stuff a little bit, and I can stand out a little bit more than some others, but no, I mean San Diego would be nice. And what were the others? Was it St. Louis? Was that another one?
No, it was Oklahoma City, Orlando, Salt Lake, and San Antonio.
I mean, I don't know. I'm not a real fan of teams switching cities in general, much less states. So, I mean, San Diego obviously would kind of be the preference, I guess, but I don't know how it would feel with that. You know what I mean? I don't know how I'd feel with them moving. It feels like they just belong there.
A lot of basketball cities here, but I guess I've obviously cities that want eventually an NFL team. But there's just so many logistical issues with this. Like they have to do conference realignment, and again, like the Medell rule just makes this very, very tough to navigate through. And I think it's a lot of things that the Bengals don't want to end up doing. So yeah, shout out to For the Win. They took advantage of something that was trending on the internet, and I'm sure they got their clicks out of it. But very, very early stages here.
Well, wow. Hyper generous from Mr. Whisper. Maybe we'll start investing in another producer, right? I mean, that's probably what these funds should be going to produce the videos a little bit better than I can. But apologies on some of the errors there. But when you get the actual videos on YouTube, the clips of those, when we do the prospect profiles, they will be fixed. I promise they will be fixed. For John, I'm Anthony. This has been, thank you, Mr. Whisper, by the way. For John, I'm Anthony. This has been the Orange and Black Insider Bengals podcast. We're going to get on out of here. John, thank you for everything. Take care, buddy. Take care, everyone. Thanks for tuning in live. Thanks for tuning in after the fact. We will see you soon.